The moment I froze her credit cards, I heard thunder. Not from the sky. The sky was clear. It came from inside me, like something cracked and echoed through my ribs. She had just texted me from Vegas, with the grace of a wrecking ball. Just married my coworker. You're pathetic BTW. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone. I just sat down next to the pile of laundry she said she'd fold after the trip and stared at her message like it was an alien transmission. I typed back, cool. One word. The same word she used when I told her my dog died last year. Fitting, I guess. Then I stood up. Calm. Controlled. Like a man loading bullets into a gun he didn't know he owned. First, I logged into the joint bank account and froze every card with her name on it, even the backup one she thought I didn't know about. Then I ordered a locksmith. He came within the hour. While he drilled through the front door, I stared at the wedding photo still hanging above the TV. I didn't take it down. That would have felt too final. Like an obituary. She married a man she works with, in a different time zone, while I was feeding her cat and watering her snake plant. And she thought I'd just sit there and eat it. I wasn't done. I turned off her access to the security cameras, disabled the garage clicker, took her name off the emergency contacts for the alarm system. The house knew who she was, and now it would forget. I didn't expect peace. I expected silence. But instead, I got sirens. At 7:42 a.m., I opened the door to 3 police officers. One of them looked at me like I was already guilty. The second one asked if I was Caleb Darnell. The third one said, calmly, "Sir, we need to talk to you about an incident involving your wife." That was the first time anyone had called her my wife since the night before, and it was the last time I'd hear it without wanting to throw up. They didn't come in right away. One of the officers stood half a step ahead of the others, hand resting near his belt, eyes scanning the hallway like I might have tripwires or a shotgun hidden in the umbrella stand. I think I was still in my slippers. The coffee hadn't even finished brewing. "Mr. Darnell?" the younger one asked. "Yeah," I answered, barely managing to swallow. My mouth had gone dry, like it didn't belong to me anymore. "We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding a report filed by your wife. Do you mind stepping outside?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. "My wife?" I echoed. "You mean my ex-wife? The one who married a different man 2 nights ago in Vegas?" None of them flinched. Not even a smirk. They were well-trained. Professional. Robotic. She reported financial abuse, unlawful eviction, and possible identity theft. The officer replied, his voice as bland as unsalted crackers. Identity theft. That broke me. I leaned against the doorframe and shook my head. "You're kidding me," I said. "She cheats on me. Marries someone else. And I'm the one under investigation? I didn't steal her identity. I deleted it from my life." That made one of them blink. The oldest one, I think. He looked like he'd seen this kind of thing before, maybe too many times. Divorce messes. Rage spirals. Men who don't bounce back. They asked to come inside. I hesitated but stepped aside. The kitchen still smelled like burnt toast. The lock guy had left behind a bit of sawdust near the front door. I hadn't cleaned it up yet. They didn't sit. Just stood there while I tried to keep my hands from shaking. "Can you walk us through what happened after you received your wife's text?" "Sure," I said. "She told me she married someone else." I said cool. Then I removed her access to the house she no longer lives in and the money she no longer has rights to. That's it. No yelling. No threats. No showing up in Vegas with a baseball bat. I even refilled the Brita. They didn't laugh. Of course they didn't. But they didn't cuff me either, so I kept going. "You want to check the bank account? Go ahead. You'll see I froze our cards, not hers alone. You want to check the locks? Fine. This is my house. She never made a single mortgage payment. Not one." The younger one scribbled in a notebook, pretending not to react when I said, "If anything, I should file charges for emotional terrorism." Still, they stayed. They asked more questions about control, power dynamics, potential coercive behavior. Like I was some mastermind instead of a guy who still irons his own socks. I finally broke when one of them asked if I had ever intimidated her. I stared at him, eyes burning. Intimidated her. I used to apologize for sneezing too loud. I bought almond milk for her smoothies, even though I'm lactose intolerant and would get hives just from pouring it. I proposed in a field of tulips because she once said daisies were too predictable. I planned our wedding. I folded the napkins into swans. And now they were standing in my kitchen like I was the criminal. But what really snapped something loose in me, what made me realize this wasn't just about her betrayal, was the final question they asked before leaving. "Do you know where your wife is now, Mr. Darnell?" I opened my mouth, closed it, then looked out the window. I had no idea. But deep down, I was starting to think this wasn't just a fling. It wasn't just revenge. This was a setup. And I just walked right into it. After the cops left, I didn't move for 10 straight minutes. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, same spot I used to dance with her barefoot while dinner burned in the oven, and stared at the wall like it might give me answers. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just cold. Hollow. Like someone had scooped out my insides and left me on autopilot. Then I remembered the shared savings account. The one we were keeping for future plans, a down payment on a cabin in Tennessee, or maybe a van she once talked about converting so we could just travel and be free. I opened the banking app. It was empty. $27,384. Gone. My hand slipped, and the phone hit the tile floor with a loud crack. I didn't even pick it up. I just stared at it like it was a piece of rotten fruit. She'd done it. She didn't just cheat. She didn't just humiliate me. She cleaned me out. But what really broke me was realizing the withdrawal happened before she even sent that message from Vegas. Before just married my coworker. Before you're pathetic, by the way. She'd already taken the money. The message wasn't the betrayal. It was the victory lap. I called the bank. They said the transaction had been made in person at a branch in Henderson, Nevada. ID verified. Signature matched. There were no flags because technically, she was still on the account. I should have removed her weeks ago, but I didn't, because I was an idiot. A loyal idiot. Still, I tried to file a fraud report. The rep paused and said, "I'm sorry, sir, but unless you can prove coercion or identity theft, there's nothing we can do." Her name's on the account. Identity theft. Again with that phrase. Funny how she could accuse me of it while committing it herself in plain sight. I hung up before I said something that would get me flagged by the NSA. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even sit. I just walked from room to room like I was trapped in someone else's life. Every photo on the wall felt like a crime scene. Every drawer held souvenirs from a marriage I apparently hallucinated. At 3:17 a.m., I got a message from an unknown number. Just a screenshot. It was a blurry photo of her, my wife, sitting in the lap of some man in a gold blazer, champagne in one hand, middle finger up on the other. The background was a cheap wedding chapel. One of those neon signs that says, "Love happens here." Underneath it, "Hope this helps your investigation," smiley face. No name. No explanation. I tried calling the number. Straight to voicemail. The recording said, "This number is no longer in service." I should have called the police. Reported the stolen money. Shown them the photo. But something told me it wouldn't matter. Because whoever sent that message, they weren't mocking me. They were warning me. The day after the screenshot, I finally did something smart. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. Not completely. I still cried in the shower like a sitcom loser. But somewhere between the silence and the caffeine shakes, something inside me snapped into place. Not rage. Not revenge. Something colder. Clarity. If she wanted to play games, I was done being the fool who kept the board clean. I was going to find out what this was really about. So I started digging. Not in a cool hacker way, mind you. I don't know code. I still think VPN is a brand of vitamins. But I knew enough to pull old bank records, shared emails, old Amazon logins, anything that might point me to what she'd been up to behind my back. At first, nothing made sense. Then I found it, buried in an old email folder she thought I didn't know about. A digital receipt for a storage unit, in her maiden name, paid up front for 6 months, starting 3 weeks before she left for Vegas. The unit was in a town just outside of Vegas called Boulder City. I didn't even know she'd ever been there. I called the number on the receipt, pretending to be her. It was a woman who answered. She sounded bored, like she'd been breathing in dust all day. "Yeah, it's still active," she said. "Unit 138B. You coming to get your stuff?" "Yup," I said, heart pounding. "Tomorrow." The next morning, I got in my car and drove 8 hours straight. No music. No podcasts. Just the sound of the tires and my thoughts stabbing each other. The place looked like every crime documentary you've ever seen. Rusted gates, sun-bleached signs, rows of silent, corrugated doors. The lady at the front barely looked up when I gave her the name. She handed me a key without asking for ID. "You're the husband?" she said. I blinked. "What?" She waved me off. Never mind. That one's yours. The lock clicked open like a coffin in a dream. Inside was chaos. Dozens of plastic bins. A mattress wrapped in plastic. And something that made my blood go cold. A framed wedding photo of me and her, face down, with the glass shattered. Someone had stepped on it, maybe more than once. It was buried under a pile of men's clothing. My clothing, stuff I hadn't even realized was missing. There were folders too. Paperwork. Old pay stubs. Photocopies of my ID. Copies of her ID with different addresses. I found a binder labeled medical, but every page inside was blank. And then I saw the burner phone. It was taped under the lid of one of the bins, wrapped in an old sock. I turned it on and braced myself. 3 contacts. Dozens of texts. Every single one erased, except one thread, still open. Unknown. You sure he won't fight it? Her. He folds like tissue. I'll be long gone before he figures it out. My ears rang. My throat burned. I stumbled out of the unit like it was filled with carbon monoxide. The sun was too bright. My hands were shaking. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a meltdown. This was a plan. And I was starting to think I wasn't even the target. I didn't drive home after I left the storage unit. I drove to a cheap motel a few blocks away and locked the door behind me like I was hiding from a war. I hadn't eaten since yesterday, but the hunger felt like a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. I had one goal now: understand what the hell was going on before it swallowed me whole. I spread everything out on the motel bed. The photos, the burner phone, the fake medical binder, the IDs with addresses I'd never lived at, and tried to make a timeline. The deeper I went, the more the pieces refused to fit into anything resembling a normal betrayal. Why would she create fake medical documents? Why was there 2 versions of her driver's license with different last names? And what kind of person calls their own husband tissue? I didn't sleep that night. Around 5 a.m., I drove to the Boulder City address I found on one of her fake IDs. I wasn't sure what I expected, maybe an abandoned building, maybe a fake business. Instead, it was a pale yellow house with a white fence and a wind chime that sounded like childhood. Someone was living there. And then the door opened. I ducked down in the car like a coward. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought I'd pass out. A woman walked out, middle-aged, gray streaks in her ponytail. Not my wife. She was carrying a yoga mat and a smoothie cup. Then a man stepped out behind her. Older, maybe late 60s. Not my wife's type. Too wrinkled, too gentle. He kissed her on the cheek. She waved goodbye and drove off in a red Subaru. I waited another 10 minutes, then walked up to the house like I was delivering a package I forgot the address for. The man answered. He looked confused but not alarmed. Hi, I said. I think there might have been some mail delivered here in my name. My wife used this address by mistake. Her name's Brittany. His face changed. Not anger. Not fear. Something else. A kind of deep, sad recognition. She used to live here, he said quietly. But not under that name. My skin went cold. He invited me in. The place smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. On the wall was a framed photo of a much younger version of him with a woman who looked a lot like my wife, but not quite. The eyes were wrong. The smile too wide. Her name was Marissa back then, he said. Said she was my niece. Stayed for about 4 months. Then one day she vanished. Took a few of my checks with her. I couldn't breathe. Same woman. Different identity. Different city. Different family. What year was that? I asked, barely above a whisper. 2 years before you married her, he said. But I guess you didn't know that, did you? No, I didn't. I didn't know anything. My wife, or whatever her real name was, had faked entire lives before me. Whole relationships. Whole identities. And I'd married her thinking she was just quirky, a little impulsive, maybe lost. But this wasn't lost. This was calculated. As I stood there in that stranger's living room, I realized something I never saw coming. I wasn't her first victim. And if I didn't move fast, I might be the last. The man, Charles, wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter either. He had that look people get after they've been fooled so completely, they stop trying to make sense of it. He poured me tea like I was a guest, and not the husband of the woman who'd lied her way into his life. He told me she came to him with a sob story, said she was in danger, said she needed to stay off the grid for a while. He believed her. She cried the first night she stayed here, he said, staring into his cup. I made her pancakes. She said her name was Marissa, said she had no one. I asked if he still had anything she left behind. He didn't answer right away. Then he stood up, walked to a hallway closet, and came back with a cardboard file box. No label. Just old papers, yellowed envelopes, and one manila folder with a sticky note that simply read, "To be used." He placed it in my lap. Inside were photocopies of my signature on documents I'd never seen. Bank forms. A line of credit application. A power of attorney form with my name typed in neatly, but the signature at the bottom was not mine. My stomach dropped. It was her handwriting. Sloppy. Rushed. Arrogant. You think she was planning something bigger? I asked, trying not to let the tremor in my voice show. I think she already did, Charles replied. Whatever this is, it's probably already in motion. I scanned the rest of the contents. There were 3 things that didn't belong. A photo of me, standing outside my old job, taken from across the street. A receipt for a storage unit I'd never rented in my name. A note, handwritten, in her looping cursive. If he ever figures it out, burn this. If not, well, I'll be sipping wine in Naples. I felt something twist behind my ribs. Not panic. This was beyond panic. This was the moment a man realizes his entire life had been used as scaffolding for someone else's scheme. I thanked Charles. He looked tired. I think part of him was relieved I showed up, as if he'd been waiting for this chapter to finish. On the drive back to the motel, I called a lawyer. One I hadn't spoken to since the house paperwork 3 years ago. I told him I suspected forged documents, financial fraud, and identity theft, but I was afraid to use those words too soon, like they'd somehow make it real. He asked me to scan and email everything. I did. 2 hours later, he called back. Caleb, I don't know how to say this, he said, but if what you sent me is legit, she's not just after your money. I asked what he meant. She's been setting you up. Slowly. Deliberately. Some of these forms, they're laying the groundwork to show you as financially unstable, possibly delusional. She even listed you as a dependent on one of the applications. That's not just identity theft, that's character destruction. I went silent. She's not hiding from you, Caleb. She's erasing you, piece by piece. And in that moment, every dumb little thing I thought was just her being chaotic, the fake medical binders, the second phone, the mismatched stories about her childhood, the weird conversations she had in whispers near the bathroom fan, it all snapped into place. This wasn't just a woman who fell out of love. This wasn't even a woman who cheated. This was a woman who built an entire exit strategy and made me the scapegoat she could walk over on her way out. I stayed off the grid after that call with my lawyer. Canceled all auto payments. Turned off location tracking on my phone. Changed every password, even ones I hadn't used in years. I didn't trust anything anymore. Not the cloud. Not my bank. Not the walls of my own house. And definitely not the people I once thought were on my side. That's when I decided to call Lindsay, her sister. We weren't close. She never really liked me, but we tolerated each other at family events. She always said Brittany needed someone more driven. I guess she meant someone easier to manipulate. Still, I figured Lindsay was the one person who might know if my wife, or whatever name she was going by now, had a pattern of this. If she'd done it to other people. If her whole life had always been a trail of lies wrapped in nice shoes and big smiles. She answered on the second ring, sounding like she hadn't slept either. What do you want? She said, no hello. I just need to know how long you knew, I said. Silence. I found the fake documents, I continued. I know about the other identities. The storage unit. The money she took. And I know she's been planning this for months. Maybe longer. Still nothing. Lindsay, did you help her? That got a reaction. A sharp breath. Then a bitter, flat voice I almost didn't recognize. I warned you. 3 years ago. Remember? I said she ruins people when she gets bored. You didn't warn me. I snapped. You just call me boring. Same thing, she muttered. Something in my chest twisted. I sat down on the edge of the bed like the floor wasn't safe anymore. So you knew what she was doing? I asked. I didn't know this, she said quickly. Not all of it. I figured she was cheating. She always does. But the other stuff, I thought she gave that up. Gave what up, Lindsay? The pause that followed wasn't long, but it was long enough. She used to run scams, she said, voice barely audible. Before you. Before most of the guys. Fake medical bills. Sympathy grifts. Even convinced one guy he had cancer just so he'd give her power of attorney. That one almost went to court. I stood up. My hand was shaking so bad I dropped my phone twice. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning? I shouted. She said she loved you, Lindsay said. I thought maybe you were the one that would fix her. I'm not a rehab center, I said, venom boiling up in my throat. I was her husband. I gave her everything, and she used it to build a story where I'm the bad guy. Lindsay let out a bitter laugh. That's her gift, Caleb. She doesn't lie like normal people. She lies like it's art. That's when she said something I'll never forget. She mentioned Naples, I said. That she'd be sipping wine there. Do you think she actually went? Another pause. Then Lindsay slipped. She hates red wine. Always said it reminded her of her mom's funeral. I never told you it was red. More silence. Lindsay, I whispered. Are you covering for her? No, she said too fast. You talked to her. I said, every muscle in my body tensing. You know where she is. I don't. I swear to God, if you don't tell me right now. She called once. Lindsay snapped. A burner number. She didn't say where she was. Just said not to believe what's coming. That you'd make it worse for yourself if you tried to fight it. My mouth went dry. What's coming? I asked. She hesitated again. I don't know, Caleb. But if I were you, I'd lawyer up fast. Whatever she's done, she's already 5 steps ahead of you. Click. She hung up. I stared at the phone, heart pounding. So this was never about heartbreak. Never about infidelity. This was about total erasure. Character assassination. Legal sabotage. And I was the idiot who'd left the front door wide open for all of it. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the motel parking lot with my keys in one hand and the burner phone in the other, thinking about how close I'd come to losing everything. Not just my money or my house, but my identity, my reputation, my sense of reality. She almost pulled it off. Almost. But the thing about people like Brittany or Marissa or whatever name she left behind this time is that they never plan for what happens when their victim refuses to stay a victim. When the pathetic husband doesn't beg, doesn't crumble, doesn't play his part. They never expect him to fight back. The next morning, I drove straight to my lawyer's office with a folder full of evidence. The forged forms, the fake addresses, the receipt from the storage unit, and the transcript of my call with her sister. He read in silence, lips tight. We have enough, he finally said. This won't be quick, but you're not powerless. We'll freeze her access, launch a formal investigation, and if she ever shows her face again, she'll be answering for a hell of a lot more than fraud. That day was the beginning of the end for her. Over the next 2 months, we filed everything: fraud reports, identity theft claims, even a civil suit for damages. I gave a sworn statement to the police. The detective assigned to my case wasn't particularly warm, but he did confirm they'd flagged her passport. She wouldn't be sipping wine in Naples, not without some serious explaining at customs. I started getting my accounts back under control. The bank reversed the withdrawal, citing probable fraud under duress. The house was secured in my name again. The burner phone was turned over to authorities. And just like that, piece by piece, I began reclaiming the life she tried to wipe clean. It wasn't easy. Some nights I still woke up sweating, convinced I'd hear her key in the lock. I had panic attacks at the sound of wedding bells on TV. But something else grew stronger too, something I didn't recognize at first. It was self-respect. Turns out, surviving someone like her changes you. It makes you quieter, sharper, more careful, but it also makes you kinder to yourself. I stopped apologizing for being soft, for being boring, for believing people mean what they say. Because the truth is, I wasn't pathetic. I was loyal. And the worst people in the world, they count on men like me blaming ourselves when the world burns around us. But I didn't burn. I rebuilt. And a year later, sitting in a new apartment with a lock only I had the code to, drinking coffee I didn't have to share, I got the final email from my lawyer. Case closed. She'd vanished again. But this time, I was the one who got away. I'm not angry anymore. I'm free.